Environmental science has struggled for a long time in being inclusive of an audience that doesn't understand the technical details that they are presenting. So now the top environmental firms are using VR and AR in order to simulate the impacts of certain developments. Now, while you do not have to create a VR environment to simulate an immersion into this sort of information, there are other software that are highly recommended to use in order to get your stakeholders more entrenched in the data that you're presenting. I'm going to expose you to some software that are going to amplify your ability to convey abstract ideas, speak to your audience, and summarize complex data sets in a visually compelling and exciting way. These tools will help your audience connect with your data and be able to see the impact of a development before it even begins. So first off is Flow Immersive. Flow Immersive is a software that I have been touting for about the last 2 years, and I am obsessed. The reason is it is really easy to plug in an Excel spreadsheet and get to work with something that is way more exciting than anything that you're going to create in Tableau. What I love about this tool is it allows you to transform what was previously a dry data set into something exciting, something that 2D graphs have a difficult time encapsulating is the depth and breadth of all of that data. Something beautiful about 3D data visualization is that you can capture millions of data points and make it into something that is as big as your message. This means that when you're working with air quality data, water quality data, something that is comprised of a lot of different measurements, you're better able to show your stakeholders exactly what the impact is going to be and keep their attention while you're doing it. Another software that I love and toy with all the time to figure out new ways of visualizing data and geospatial information is Blender. Most people are fairly familiar with Blender, perhaps on the animation front, but something that is underused within Blender are the amazing plugins and methods to do environmental visualization. If you're conflicted about whether or not this is the right tool, talk to an expert and see what exactly they can do with Blender in terms of helping your firm out with environmental visualization. Most environmental firms and architectural firms are going to be familiar with SketchUp, and I get asked sometimes, what is the difference between SketchUp and Blender? Well, Blender is more difficult to use, so that is why a lot of firms stay away from using it. But what is the benefit of using it? If it's more difficult, you're able to better show the granular details of that environment and the impact that it'll have. So the difficulties that people tend to have with Blender versus SketchUp is that in SketchUp, there are easy to import models for the architectural part of the rendering, whereas in Blender, you're going to be searching the web and you might have to go along with the blueprints. I've linked to one of my favorite tutorials on how to do this. The problem is with SketchUp is you're not getting the same level of geospatial accuracy and you cannot achieve the same sorts of simulations that you can in Blender. For instance, if you're trying to tell your client about the resiliency of a certain sort of structure, or when you're considering its impact on surrounding structures, there is no better tool than Blender. You can import real geospatial data into your model and on top of that, use it as a canvas to be painting your new architectural model on. This can be a synergy between SketchUp and Blender. And when you're talking about creating realistic landscapes, really painting a picture for the environmental impact, the other amazing feature is that you can include 3D models of buildings with the Google Maps API. This is quite easy to use and will allow you to build an accurate model that shows the real geographic details and proximity to other existing structures. Environmental firms ask sometimes, why would we want to use Blender instead of SketchUp? SketchUp is so much easier. SketchUp does support some geolocation tools, but its integration with real-world GIS data is not as seamless or detailed as Blender's, and it leads to less accurate representations of real-world environments. It's not detailed in environmental simulations, i.e., erosion or with fluid dynamics. It also does not allow for basic terrain modeling, which represents natural landscapes and is more limited when compared to Blender. It's good for visualizing general site layouts, but struggles with more complex features required for environmental impact visualizations. Let's say that you're capturing some sort of enormous swath of land and you're trying to say, hey, we have Joshua tree species here, it's going to decimate the population. And this is going to be a better way for your firm to be able to show what the species impact, what the landscape impact is going to be. And this does not mean that it needs to be exclusive from your use of SketchUp. The two can go together. So another software that I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again because I love it, is Google Earth Engine. Google Earth Engine is free to use for non-commercial use. There are also commercial options available, and it is fantastic to show impact before it happens in how you're able to capture aerial imagery and before and after because of the large historical repository that it has. While you may not be including historical analyses within an environmental impact report, if you're tracking something like ongoing deforestation or land changes, then this is a great tool to use. You can visualize both 2D and 3D data using Google Earth Engine and create exciting looking impact assessments. Celsium is a lesser known tool compared to some of its cousins like ArcGIS. It is not strictly a GIS tool. Celsium excels in presenting immersive 3D models, giving you the ability to build dynamic, interactive representations of the real world, and it's particularly useful for visualizing how environmental impacts evolve over time. Think about showing erosion along a coastline, visualizing deforestation in an at-risk area, or demonstrating how a new highway will impact an ecosystem. Here's an example to consider. Imagine creating a 3D model of a coastal cliff to show how sea level rise might accelerate erosion over the next 50 years. Instead of just talking about erosion rates, you can show the entire process unfolding visually, making the data not only understandable but memorable. Stakeholders can explore the landscape from different angles, zoom in on areas of interest, and interact with the data in ways that help them better understand potential outcomes. If you found this video helpful and you want to communicate with your audience better and tell complex stories but in digestible ways, follow along with the tutorials on the tools, techniques, and methods that I use for visual storytelling.